I never like to arrive on site to that sound. That's hedge cutting by the local farmer to here at Kirton Wood. However, although I don't like that sound, I don't like the site that's in front of me, because whenever you enter Woodland and you see tyre tracks, it inevitably means they've been cutting something down somewhere. But I'm here with the intention of looking for White-letter Hairstreak eggs. That's the intention. I see the chainsaws have been active the last few weeks. This is Kirton Wood. Now got copious coverage of dead hedges. I don't know why they bother with dead hedges. I don't see the point. All this might as well have been burnt, to be honest. They have this thing though that these dead hedges and leaving the brash where it is helps invertebrates. Well, it doesn't, because any invertebrate eggs that's on all the branches that have been cut down, they're doomed anyway. There's going to be no foliage for them because that foliage will die. I don't get the thinking behind dead hedges. They're the most useless thing. All they do, they're more detrimental than anything, because they just cover valuable forest flora. And when you're thinning out areas like this southern edge of Kirton Wood, you're thinning it out purely to attract the sun, get that sunlight to the forest floor. That in turn creates a greater ground flora. Well, at least it should do. But the mass of material that you cut down, when you just lay it in either piles of brash or, as in here, dead hedges, rather defeats the object. You're not letting no sunlight to the forest floor or woodland floor. In fact, you're shading it out and making it even more damp and wet. It does nothing for invertebrates. I'm sorry, it doesn't. I still, when I look around woodlands like this and I see the work that's been done, there is no thought whatsoever towards invertebrates. And I have to bang on about the effects of woodland or forestry work on invertebrates, because if I don't, nobody else will. And it's up to people whether they believe me or like what I say or not. But at a time when the majority of species that feed on invertebrates, such as your birds and reptiles and everything, bats, good old bats, when they're all generally in decline, it's no wonder there's less food for them, there's less invertebrates. And all this sort of so-called woodland management just takes away even more invertebrates out of the food chain. Nothing wins in the end, yet the importance of invertebrates is completely neglected, not even considered, I don't think. I like the middle of Kirton Wood. It's a lovely spot, but it's been cut down. It's an area that was opened up a number of years ago, and then coppice, and it's just been recoppiced again. All well and good, but now there's just piles and piles of brash everywhere. It does nothing, it's not creating anything. They might as well have just put a bonfire here at the side of where I'm stood and burnt it all. Clear it, open up the ground a little bit. You can see how damp Kirton Wood is anyway. Kirton Wood's one of a series of woods that lies on a clay-based soil, and they're all pretty much exact carbon copies of this, predominantly ash with some elm and a few other trees as well. And this kind of woodland occurs sporadically over quite an area of northeast Nottinghamshire. You can tell how damp it is because everything is covered with moss. But it would be so much better if they had a day burning this brash. Maybe leave one pile, fair enough. But apart from it looking a mess for one thing, it's just covering up so much potential habitat underneath. Habitat is no good for anything. Yeah, a few mammals and a few spiders. That's all you get in dead hedges. You don't get masses of invertebrates. Just a few fat spiders. But it could just be so much better if there'd been a little bit more thought. Just been looking at this coppice that they've coppiced again. But instead of moving the coppice, taking it away, or actually using it for a country craft, heaven forbid someone would do that. It's just been cut and dropped exactly underneath or on top of the coppice. It does nothing for the habitat, nothing for the woodland floor, nothing for invertebrates, nothing for ground flora. In fact, it's detrimental in the way that dead hedges are, in my opinion. This would be far better if it was dragged here and put up on a bonfire. They still can't, I don't think they ever will realise that there's a correlation between tree removal and invertebrate decline. No one really will admit there's a whole scale invertebrate decline, and yet there is. It's obvious. I mean, those of us who were around in the early 70s and 80s can remember how your car windscreen used to be splattered with flies on any sort of lengthy journey during the summer. You don't get a fly splattered on your windscreen anymore, even if you drive for about 200 miles. And although there are a number of other factors and causes, I think tree removal, scrub removal is part of it. But we can't see it. If you have 3 trees of equal size, say in the middle of a field, trees are all of one species and they all hold 1,000 invertebrates each. You take 2 of those trees out, you're left with 1 tree that's then got to support 3,000 invertebrates. It can't do it. Not for any length of time. Something has to give, and it's invertebrate numbers that gives. The nightjar in Nottinghamshire is declining. The reason for the nightjar's decline in Nottinghamshire, and there's plenty of habitat, we've got more habitat for nightjars now than we've ever had really in Nottinghamshire, but the reason that it's declining is because there are fewer moths and larger moths, species like your yellow underwings and things like that, there's fewer of them. Those who trap moths may well sit there and say, well, nightjars want to come and fly around my trap when I open it up in the morning because there can be 600 or 700 large yellow underwings in it, but there are far fewer moths to satisfy a nightjar's hunger than there used to be, and that's all down to woodland and site management, the continual removal of trees and the removal of scrub. It all has an effect, but that effect is ignored, even if it's considered, I believe, because the most important thing of all regarding conservation is the conservation of habitat, not what's in that habitat. Well, now on the eastern side of Kirton Wood here, I've come down the southern side and did that quite quickly actually, because there's just nothing to look on for white-letter hairstreak eggs. All the wych elm and all the other scrub that is growing out to the side of the wood has been cut down and is now a dead hedge. Trouble is, the mower's gone down here, the tractor led mower, they cut the grass and then they put a flail unit on and cut the vegetation, the scrub growth on this side. Whole scale management like that might be quick, might be cheap, but it's destructive to invertebrates. And countless eggs of white-letter hairstreak and other species will have been lost. They'll still hatch, those that's in the egg stage over the winter, and if there's any larvae on the branches and brash that's been cut off of any moth, they will survive. But chances of them finding food and completing the life cycle are, quite frankly, minimal. So the big problem is finding a wych elm where I can look for the eggs of white-letter hairstreak. But there is one here. This looks like a likely candidate, and I'll show you why, because the key, from my experience, lies in the buds. You wouldn't have thought it, would you? Now I'll try and keep this steady, but this twig here is a good example of the kind of situation in which I typically find white-letter hairstreak eggs. You need to look for a wych elm that is going to flower, and the flowers are going to come from these roundish buds here. A lot of wych elm that you look at will have these more pointed buds towards the end. Some there'll be pointed buds on whatever growth there is. So you need to look for a wych elm that is going to flower, and that flower comes from these roundish buds. And these are typically the wych elms that are favoured, in my experience, by white-letter hairstreaks. Now the eggs can be anywhere. They can be on the old leaf scars, they can be in the joint where twig meets main stem. So you have to be very methodical. You can't Google these, and you can't find them by OBS Identify app. You have to put in a bit of diligence and time and effort. Well, I found one. If you look on the growth of this, just a small twig, you may well be thinking to yourself, well, why on earth has the idiot taken the twig off? But I'll tell you why in a minute. But our egg is at the tip here, laid on the leaf scar right at the end. You may well be able to See an almost silvery or greyish roundish disc, about 1 millimetre in diameter. That's your typical location actually for white-letter hairstreak eggs. The majority, in my experience, are at the base of a bud like that, and of course these, being 3 rounded buds, are all flower buds, which means that once a caterpillar hatches from the egg, because the caterpillars overwinter fully formed in the egg, and they just wait for the warmer weather and for the buds to burst and the flowers to start to open, then the caterpillars emerge and enter these buds and begin feeding. They're very easy to beat from wych elm in a few months' time, very easy. But we have an egg of white-letter hairstreak. Now then, the questions to which you're all asking: why has he taken the egg and the twig that it was on off the tree? Well, the reason why is because the branch or the tree that it's on has been sawn down. And I think it's purely been sawn down just to block the side of this gateway. And it has been sawn down, there's been no damage. It's not as if it's come down or partly come down and split. There's a nice neat cut at the base up there. And so everything which should be 10-20 feet in the air is now on the floor. So there's no point me leaving this on here for this caterpillar to hatch and then die through lack of food, or it may well get to an insar or two and then die through lack of food. I might as well either try and find somewhere else to put this on, or take it home and try and rear it. But there are obviously a number of white-letter hairstreak eggs on this that are going to die. And it's for such a meaningless reason as well, to cut a tree down. Just to, as far as I can see, it's just to block an entrance into the wood. Is it me, or is the world going completely balmy? Now, very easily and quickly found another one, laid in exactly the same situation as to the one I've just taken off here to show you. And this one's another egg, which is very easy to see. In fact, I can see this from distance. So we'll remove this one too. And we'll get it somewhere safe. How many more eggs are going to be on here? This location would be a nice warm location, sunny as well for the majority of the day. So this tree was probably well used by a number of female white-letter hairstreaks. It won't be until the tree suckers again and it grows up. But what great little eggs they are. If I turn it round, you may well be able to get an idea of how thin they are, but we'll put some photos in along the way. Quite remarkable things. It's alright, I'm just gawping at a harlequin ladybird that's actually moving about. On a day like this, temperatures in the low single figures, and with a cool easterly or northeasterly breeze. But just working my way back to the car, complete with my 2 prized white-letter Hairstreak eggs, which looks as though I'll be trying to rear through, at least give them a good chance, better chance than they'd have had if I'd have left them here. White-letter Hairstreak's done well in Nottinghamshire, at least in the last 20-30 years. Probably never been as common or as well recorded. It was thought that Dutch elm in the 1970s would completely decimate the white-letter Hairstreak population, but it didn't, and that's because the butterflies were found to utilise elm sucker growth. Butterflies done really well because of that. Didn't need the mature elm trees. But it'd be nice if just a little bit more thought was given towards invertebrates. I'll be making videos like this for years, I'm sure, because I doubt that more thought will be given to invertebrates, or at least any maintenance work will be geared more towards looking after invertebrates. I think things will remain the same. They'll say we've only got the machinery for a day and we can't mollycoddle or micromanage. That's a favoured term amongst some. But hopefully numbers will continue to do well here. But it'd just be nice if some elm could be left and the butterfly could go through its life cycle without hindrance from man. Again,